What if the battle between good and evil wasn't fought in the shadows, but in the mind of a 23-year-old woman? Tonight, we revisit one chilling story. A young woman, her family, and two priests waged a 10-month battle against what they strongly believed was a demonic force. The events you are about to hear inspired the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
And I am Lucifer.
Which raises questions about faith, science, and the nature of possession. Was Anneliese Michel truly possessed, or was her tragedy the result of a deadly misunderstanding between science and faith? Join me, Detective Obscura, as we uncover the haunting case of Anneliese Michel, a story where faith collides with science, and the line between the supernatural and psychological grows perilously thin. Anneliese Michel was born on September 21st, 1952, in the small village of Klingenberg am Main, Germany. Like many in post-war Europe, her life was marked by strict traditions and deep religious faith. The Michel family was devoutly Catholic, and this devotion formed the foundation of Anneliese's upbringing. Anneliese was known to be a thoughtful, kind, and intelligent girl. Her teachers described her as diligent and ambitious, with dreams of becoming a teacher. But beneath her quiet exterior lay a young woman burdened by an immense sense of responsibility for her soul and the souls of others.
Also, ja, ich will auch für die anderen leiden, damit die nicht in die Hölle kommen und so. Aber dass das dann so schlimm ist.
Her family, steeped in Catholic doctrine, often spoke of sin, atonement, and the weight of divine judgment. For Anneliese, these teachings weren't just lessons, they were the fabric of her identity. Yet, her life was anything but ordinary. At the age of 16, Anneliese's world began to change. During a normal day at school, she suddenly lost consciousness, collapsing to the floor in a seizure. When she awoke, she had no memory of the incident. Doctors diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy, a neurological condition that can cause seizures, altered states of consciousness, and even intense spiritual or religious experiences. At first, the episodes were manageable with medication, but as the years passed, her symptoms became more pronounced and more terrifying. By her early 20s, Anneliese began reporting chilling experiences. She described seeing grotesque, shadowy figures and hearing guttural voices telling her she was condemned to hell. Her condition baffled her doctors. Medications like Dilantin and Tegretol failed to control her seizures or ease her hallucinations. The Michel family grew increasingly desperate for answers. For Anneliese, this was more than just a medical crisis. It was a spiritual one. She began to believe that she was cursed, plagued by demonic forces. Her family, equally devout, shared this belief. And so, they turned to the church for help. In 1957, after months of pleading, the Michel family's cries for help reached the ears of the local diocese. Two priests, Father Arnold Renz and Father Ernst Alt, were granted permission to perform the ancient rite of exorcism on Anneliese. This was no small decision. Exorcisms by the 1970s had become rare, seen by many as relics of a superstitious past. But for Father Alt, there was no doubt. Anneliese was possessed. Over the next 10 months, Anneliese would endure a grueling series of 67 exorcisms. These rituals, which often lasted several hours, involved Latin prayers, sacred chants, and repeated invocations to drive out the supposed demons. During these sessions, Anneliese claimed to be possessed by several entities, including Lucifer, Judas Iscariot, Nero, and even Cain. Witnesses described her strength as inhuman and her screams as otherworldly.
Was fressen du das nicht?
Noch mehr.
But the toll on her body was catastrophic. She stopped eating and drinking. Her physical frame, once healthy and vibrant, became skeletal. Yet she insisted that the demons were controlling her actions, forbidding her from taking sustenance. By the summer of 1976, Anneliese could no longer stand or speak without assistance. Despite her worsening condition, the exorcisms continued. On July 1, 1976, Anneliese Michel died in her home, weighing just 68 pounds. The aftermath of Anneliese Michel's death ignited a firestorm of controversy. Her parents, Joseph and Anna, along with the two priests, were charged with negligent homicide. Prosecutors argued that Anneliese had been gravely ill, suffering from epilepsy and severe psychosis. They claimed her death was preventable. Had she been hospitalized and properly treated, she might have survived. The defense, however, presented a different narrative. They argued that Anneliese's symptoms could not be explained by science alone. They played tapes from the exorcisms in court, allowing the jury to hear the chilling voices, growls, screams, and incomprehensible languages that Anneliese had spoken. Father Alt insisted that Anneliese had willingly refused medical treatment, believing it was part of her divine mission to suffer for the sins of others. Her parents, meanwhile, maintained that they had done everything in their power to save her. In 1978, the jury reached its verdict. All 4 defendants were found guilty of manslaughter, but were sentenced to just 6 months in prison, later suspended. The trial left the world divided. Was Anneliese a victim of possession or a victim of ignorance? Anneliese Michel's story is not just about faith or science. It's about the dangerous intersection of the two. Her parents' belief in possession was not unique. In 1970s Germany, mental illness was often misunderstood or stigmatized, particularly in deeply religious communities. For Joseph and Anna Michel, the idea of a spiritual battle was far more acceptable than acknowledging a psychological disorder. The priests, too, operated within this framework. Father Alt, who was deeply sympathetic to mysticism and the supernatural, believed he was fulfilling God's work. But their actions reveal a tragic lapse in judgment, a failure to recognize the medical realities of Anneliese's condition. Today, we know far more about the brain than we did in the 1970s. Temporal lobe epilepsy can cause profound spiritual experiences, leading sufferers to believe they're encountering divine or demonic forces. Combined with untreated psychosis, it's easy to see how Anneliese's symptoms could spiral into the terrifying ordeal she described. Anneliese's story also forces us to confront the broader implications of untreated mental illness. She lived in a time when conditions like epilepsy and psychosis were poorly understood, and when spiritual explanations often overshadowed medical ones. Experts have suggested that Anneliese may have also suffered from Geschwind syndrome, a rare condition that can amplify religious intensity, hypergraphia, and obsessive behaviors. Tragically, her cries for help were interpreted through the lens of faith, not science. Anneliese Michel's death was preventable, but she became trapped between two worlds, one that saw her as a medical patient and one that saw her as a spiritual victim. It was this misunderstanding, this tragic gap between faith and medicine, that ultimately sealed her fate. Anneliese Michel's story is not just a haunting tale, it's a mirror. It reflects our fears, our beliefs, and the ways we fail those who need us most. Was she possessed, or was she a victim of a misunderstood mind? Was she abandoned by science, consumed by faith, or caught in the crossfire of both? The truth, like Anneliese herself, exists in the shadows, somewhere between what we believe and what we know. Her case stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of ignoring mental health, the need for understanding, and the devastating consequences of dogma, whether religious or scientific. What do you think? Was Anneliese fighting demons from another world, or was she battling the demons within her mind? The answer may never be clear, but one thing is certain. Her story continues to echo, asking questions we have yet to answer. Thank you for joining me on today's investigation into the unknown. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysterious and the unexplained. Stay curious, stay safe.